We're coming up on that time of year when we maker people use our talents to make things for our friends and family and give them away as gifts. The problem is there's only so much time between right now and those days in a couple of months when you're going to be giving things away. And some of those people will also be knitters and makers. So today I'm going to solve all your problems. Or at least this one, of time and what to make. You know that feeling of having a ton of works in progress, also known as WIPs? So do all your knitting friends. So I have the perfect gift for you. It's this crazy, adorable work in progress ornament that you can make in under an hour. In fact, once you get going, you can probably do at least 2 in an hour. Scout's honor. Ridiculously cute, right? A few years back, I made 20 of these, one for each of the knitters in my office knitting group. Everyone loved them. 20 sounds like a lot. These are so fast, it's really not that big a deal. Okay, Christmas is coming, and coming fast, as always. Let's go to the hand cam, and I will show you the things you need and where to get them, and what to do with them once you have them. This is going to be fast and fun. You're going to love it. See you there. Okay, are we ready to play? Here's some of the fun stuff that you're going to need to make our lovely little ornament. Such a beauty, isn't it? So we need a bit of equipment and a bit of yarn and ornaments. These are fillable glass flat ornaments with a removable hanger. That's where we're going to stuff our little knitted goodie in there, just like building a ship in a bottle, except you're going to build the ship outside the bottle and then cram it in there when you're done. You can also use this type of acrylic. This one is not glass, it's plastic. Also removable, same size opening in the top. It's not flat, it's round. It works just as well. The only difference is I like the flat ones because I like how they keep the little WIP, our little work in progress, sitting upright inside the ornament, where in this one, it just kind of flops around and does what it wants. But, you know, that's not the worst thing in the whole wide world. So either one of these will be fine. These are probably, the acrylic ones are probably a bit cheaper. These glass flat ones that I ordered on Amazon run about just under $3 a piece Canadian. I imagine you're going to pay about the same price for them down in the United States of America and elsewhere. I will put a link to my Canadian Amazon source down below in the description box. Down, which way is below here? down below in the description box. And I'm sure if you click on that, it will take you to a similar product in the Amazon of your country. I might be wrong. If I'm completely out to lunch, please let me know. And if you have a good source where you are for these, either of these kinds, that's a good price and easily attainable, then please tell us down in the comments. It'd be super helpful. So what we need to make that, we need some yarn, either a light fingering or lace weight yarn of some variety. I have these little guys on hand. You can see this is a little wound up mini skein, just like this guy, little wound up mini skein. So great use for those little mini skeins that if you might have gotten in your knitter's advent calendar from last year. If you want to learn more about what the heck you should do with mini skeins, you can go to the link up there that will take you to my video about how I accidentally knit a $300 baby blanket, which talks about mini skeins and uses for mini skeins. I digress. Yes, Oscar, as usual. So a bit of just some plain yarn or fancy, whatever works for you. But here's what I do is I just get some regular yarn. It can be any kind. It does not matter. No one is ever going to touch it. And then to shoosh it up a little bit, I like to add something fuzzy. So this is Kid Silk Mohair. This particular one right here is Rowan Kid Silk Haze. You're probably familiar with this one. And I also have in my stash, I had a little sample mini skein of this Bramble Ridge, which is Surrey Alpaca in Bluebird. Isn't that pretty? That would look really pretty held together with something. And I also recently bought from my dear friend Smita from her online store, Your Next Knit, these fantastic Gepard Kid Seta mohair silk blends. Aren't they lovely? They are just delightful, and they are absolutely perfect for this project. So I'll just put those over there. So plain yarn, something fuzzy, and then if you want, you can also add some bling. And you can see here I have some of this lovely, what do you call this color? Steel gray paillettes. You can see those wee little tiny sequins in there. Aren't they fantastic? And I also bought some recently from Crafty Jackalope, paillettes in gold. Aren't they fun? And they, again, are great for this project. If you don't have anything like that or you can't find anything like that, go to Michael's, or I'm not sure if Walmart would carry these, but I'm pretty sure Michael's will have some of this metallic embroidery floss. Anywhere you buy embroidery floss, you should be able to come up with a bit of some kind of metallic that you can use for blending. These ones are actually called blending filaments, and you can use those to knit in with this just to give it that little extra bit of glittery party time sparkle. Not necessary. You could leave out the bling altogether. You could leave out the mohair. You could just use a fingering weight yarn or something fingering weight that's naturally fuzzy, or even something that's got bling built in. You can do whatever you want. I'm just showing you how I did mine. I quite like the effect of them. They look just a little tiny bit more special than just using a plain old yarn. And you need small needles. I'm using 2.5 millimeter here. 2 3/4 millimeter would work just fine. 2 3/4 millimeter, according to my handy dandy needle gauge, is about a 2 US. Okay, but I'd say anything from 2.5, 2 3/4, 3 millimeter will be fine. What you want is you want something that is the same size or slightly bigger than your teeny tiny knitting needles. And these are my preference for your teeny tiny knitting needles. I'll hold these up in the camera where you can see them. See how they have this delightful little scrolled finish at the top, and they look just like those fancy wooden needles. These are merely ornate toothpicks. You can buy a huge pack of them, lifetime supply like this. I saw them on Amazon for about $15. I bet you could even find them cheaper. So once you have these, you can make as many ornaments as you like and then use the rest of them for your holiday cocktail parties. So your needle needs to be just about the same size or a little bit bigger than your fancy little mini toothpick knitting needle. You'll also want a darning needle just to weave in the ends from your cast on. Just a quick, tiny, wee little bit of, just a wee little bit of weaving in, and a pair of tweezers on the long side that can fit down inside your ornament in case you want to move things around. You could also just use, you know, a skinny knitting needle or even a chopstick, anything like that. But I do find being able to grab things and move them around is just a little bit easier. So if you happen to have tweezers, I think these came with my serger, my sewing equipment. You might have something like this. Anyway, they're not expensive. You could just add them to your set of tools. Of course, you'll want a pair of scissors of some variety. Not important, just to cut the yarn. And that's it. I think we're ready to play. So let's pick out some yarn. You're going to need about 10 yards of each of whatever you're using per ornament swatch. You probably won't use the whole 10 yards, but I would just make sure you have 10 yards just to be sure. That's really ample. So let's take this little green. I wouldn't mind working with this. I haven't tried this one yet. This combo right here is this guy right here and the gold paillettes and the green mohair. It's really pretty, isn't it? I absolutely love it. Can't wait to put that on my Christmas tree. And while I'm untangling this and undoing it, I guess I could have done this ahead of time, but what fun would that be? I also want you to realize that these do not have to be Christmas ornaments. You could give them to anybody, anytime, anywhere. The green ones could be St. Patrick's Day gifts. You could do red for Valentine's Day. You could do some pretty little pastel colors for Easter. I mean, there's all kinds of possibilities. They do not have to be limited to Christmas time, so you don't have to be someone who celebrates Christmas or even exchanges gifts or any of those things and give these away. Okay, look, I'm about to make a huge mess. I'm doing that thing that I tell people never to do, which is never to just open up their skein of yarn and start knitting off of it. Okay, I decided to go and take my skein, my little mini skein, and pop it on the Swift and hand wind it into a ball because I was about to veer off into yarny chaos there for a second, and I just wanted to stop that dead in its tracks. So here we are, little mini skein wound into a ball. So we're going to take this, and I think I want to use this pale gray Kid Silk Haze as my fuzzy component. And what do you think? Should we go with the silvery gray with this? Yes, I think we should. Let's do that. We're kind of got a cool thing going on here, so let's keep that going. And so we'll take that and put it all together. Okay, here we are. This is our group of yarns. And now, step number 1 is we are going to cast on 14 stitches. Yep, no kidding. 14, that is it. So I'm going to use a long tail cast on, so I've left myself a generous bit of tail here. You're using such a little amount of yarn for this project that it really doesn't matter if you overestimate. This is a very frugal and delightful little knitting project, and I am not counting as I talk, so I better stop and count. What have I got here? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12, 13, one more. 14. Okay, there we go. 14 stitches on our tiny little needle. Now, I'm not going to make you watch me knit through this, so I'm going to pause here and I am going to come back with a completed piece of knitting to show you the next step. All right, we're back and I've knit a few rows of this combination of the green and the two grays, and I'm looking at it and actually I'm not 100% sure that I love it that much. The gray seems to be really making the green quite dull. I thought it would be brighter. You see when you look how bright this is, but I guess the blending of the two has just created this bit of sort of dulled out green knitting. So I don't think I'm going to finish this combination, but lucky for us, through the magic of YouTube, I happen to have this finished little square right here. And what I did was I worked about 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11. You could do 10 or 11 ridges. So that's like 20 to 22 rows in garter stitch. You could knit any stitch pattern you want here, actually. You could rib this, you could do stockinette, you could put a little cable in it, you could do a little intarsia or fair isle, whatever you like. But if you want to do this in under an hour, trust me, garter stitch is the way to go. It also looks the same on both sides. So when it's in your ornament, there's no right or wrong side. It's going to look great and the same on both sides. And you don't need to swatch. I know, you're never going to hear me say that again, I bet. That is a rare occasion when I tell you you don't need to swatch. And the reason is that this is actually, a teeny tiny little swatch in itself. So if for any reason this is not too big or too small, just rip it back and start over just like you would with a swatch. So you are building fabric and swatching at the same time for this game. Before we take this and put it into our ornament, there's a couple of things we want to do. One is we want to weave in this tail, and the other is I actually just realized I need to stop knitting halfway through. So I'm just going to tink this back half the stitches. I've got 14 stitches on here. So I'm going to tink back. For those of you who are not aware, tink is knit spelled backwards, and it is the action of unknitting one stitch at a time, as opposed to frogging, which is removing your stitches from the needle and just ripping them out. Okay, let's see, is that half? 2, 4, 6, 7. Yes, that's half. So that's where we want to stop, is halfway through. And before I put this onto my adorable little miniature toothpicks, I'm just going to cut myself a cleaner end. Take this darning needle and fold those ends over, pinch them tight, shove them through the eye. And we don't have to get really fancy about this part. It's really not going to be visible, and this is never going to come undone. So I just kind of wiggle the ends, and even just a ½ an inch worth through a few of the garter bumps and draw it through and cut the tail off close to the fabric. All right, we are almost done. Now, the next step is to transfer our knitting onto our tiny knitting needles. One thing that you might want to do is just run your hand over these to feel if they're at all rough. That one feels a little on the rough side. You can actually almost see the roughness on that guy. So there's two things you can do. You can either take an emery board or a little bit of sandpaper and just smooth it off, because believe me, ask me how I know, but trying to get those fuzzy stitches, especially mohair, onto your little, oh, broke my toothpick. All right, let's get a fresh one. There we go. That one really was rough. It just broke in half. And we'll just smooth it out with the emery board or a little bit of sandpaper, whatever you happen to have on hand. There we go. And that will help make it easier to transfer these stitches onto the toothpick. Now, I want the tips to be where these tips are, so I'm not going to transfer that way. I'm going to move these stitches to the end of the needle, and then I'm going to transfer them one by one onto the toothpick. If they are really, really hard to get on the toothpick, then you might want to try working your swatch again, or at least the last few rows with a bigger needle to make sure that the stitches are loose enough to slide fairly easily onto that tiny toothpick knitting needle. So let's just do the same on this side. We're just going to transfer them over to there and take our second tiny needle, mini needle, and slide those stitches on. Okay, there we are. Here we are ready to take this and put it inside the ornament. Don't worry about this part just yet. I'll get to that in a minute. But I will mention that when I finished knitting, I left myself a good yard of yarn before I cut it, because we're going to wind it into the teeny tiny little ball of yarn to stuff inside the ornament with our knitted piece. But we don't need to worry about that yet. We're going to put this inside the ornament first. So we're just going to take it, fold it in half, take our ornament and remove the hanger. And then you can decide which way you want this to go into the ornament. If you want it to go with the needles down, so it would be sitting in the ornament with the needles at the bottom, or with the needles up. It doesn't really matter. With this one, they're going to be either direction. It's not going to make much difference with the round one. But with the flat one, I kind of like the look of the needles pointing up. It looks more like I could just pick this up and knit with it. But it's entirely up to you. So if we want the needles up, we're going to start by squooshing the bottom of the knitting inside the ornament and just squoosh it. Now, when you get to about where the base of the tiny needles are, you need to turn and push those down in together, and then just gently nudge the whole thing inside there. And this is the part where we take either a needle or a pair of tweezers, and we just go in and manipulate this a bit. Doesn't take much. There we are, just to get it smoothed out and looking like that. Oh, I have tools all over the place now. Let's clean up my workspace. And last, we're going to take this, our long tail, and wind it into a teeny tiny ball of yarn, which can be a bit tricky, but just do a few wraps, turn, squeeze tight with your fingers, turn, squeeze tight, turn, And you can make this ball a bit bigger if you want, but you have to remember that it's got to fit through this hole. So it can't be too giant and huge. And then I will just pop it in there and shake it down. And ta-da! There's our little work in progress. Hanger back on the top. And ta-da! We're done. That was it. That's all there is to it. So it really doesn't take very long to knit about 20 rows of 14 stitches. I'm sure you would agree with me there. And the rest of it is just a little bit of fiddly moving the parts around and then inserting the knitting into your ornament, and away you go. I've made a few of these just in a bit of time this afternoon preparing for this. And like I said, you can switch this up. You could knit yourself a little tiny mini scarf. You could knit a little sock if you're feeling super ambitious. You can knit whatever you want. Yes, Oscar, you could even knit a little cashmere dog bed and stuff it inside here. But you know what? You're never going to touch it because it's behind glass. So there's not much point, right? Right. And there you have it. Can't you imagine making like a billion of these and giving them away to your friends and family? Excellent for last minute gifts, stocking stuffers, you name it. Make it however you want. The Knitter's WIP Ornament world is your oyster or ornament. Keep those tiny needles clicking, and we'll see you next time. Here's a video that YouTube thinks you're going to want to watch. I say goodbye. Oscar says goodbye. And I guess I'm off to make a cashmere ornament for him. Bye.